Good afternoon, everybody. Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Shahzad Hafeez will defend the academic thesis. I also would like to welcome the supervisors, Professor Moroni, Professor van Blitterswijk, and Dr. Baker. I would also like to say a big welcome to the family and friends that are here on site and online. I will now invite Shahzad Hafeez to present a summary of your study and the conclusion of your thesis with the title Chemically Tuning Dynamic Networks and Supramolecular Assemblies to Enable Synthetic Extracellular Matrices for Tissue Engineering.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear Prorector, members of committee, and family and friends, in next about 15 minutes, I'll present my PhD thesis, which is about tuning dynamic covalent networks and supramolecular assemblies for creation of synthetic extracellular matrix for applications in tissue engineering. So if you look at this picture, the ultimate goal of tissue engineering is to restore, improve, or replace diseased or damaged tissues with the healthy ones. Tissue engineering combines cells, a right environment, which is a scaffold, and tissue architecture techniques to create complex, lifelike structures. During my PhD, I was interested to create a right microenvironment using principles of organic chemistry and material science. So before I go and explain what I did, I want you to look at these two pictures. So on the left, you have plastic chair, and on the right, you have human body. So plastic chair, you can see, is a static. What human body is a dynamic. So we move around, we jump. Our body can dissipate a lot of stresses. So our body is made up of tissues, and in this picture you can see we have different tissues which dissipate stresses. So this is a stress relaxation test where you apply a constant strain and you can see a decrease in stress over time. If you look for conventional materials that are covalently cross-linked, they do not dissipate stress, or very little stress is dissipated. But if you look at tissues, they are more like slippery. They relax stresses, so they are dynamic. So for us, we know that tissues are made up of cell, and this is a picture of a single cell extracellular matrix. You have a cell membrane, and the outer side of a cell is extracellular matrix. And you know that this is made up of proteins, proteoglycans, and glycosaminoglycans. And if you look at the structure of this extracellular matrix, which was inspiration for us, we can already see that this is a self-assembled structure. It has fibrous morphology. It's a supramolecular hydrogel, since it has more than 80% water, and it is a dynamic. So since it's a dynamic, I, as a material scientist, was interested what type of interactions and bonds are which it is made up of. And this is a single polypeptide backbone, which you can see you have three types of bonds: covalent, dynamic covalent, and non-covalent. So I was interested particularly in dynamic covalent bonds and non-covalent interactions. And the biggest question that we asked ourselves was, can we take inspiration from ECM, and can we use dynamic covalent chemistry and supramolecular chemistry to create synthetic ECM to use as hydrogels and bioinks? So we use dynamic covalent chemistry, amine type, where we use alginate with aldehydes to cross-link. And then second chemistry, which was supramolecular, based on non-covalent interactions that I used, was BTAs, which self-assemble via hydrogen bonding interactions. So the first question that I wanted to address in my early days was, can we create viscoelastic hydrogel and bioink using amine type chemistry? So we oxidized alginate, and we used different type of amines, and we formed different type of bonds, which are oxime, semicarbazone, and hydrazone. So we wanted to tune stiffness and viscoelasticity using K equilibrium and K1, which is forward rate reaction constant, and viscoelasticity, which is with K-1, which is reverse rate reaction constant. So this is a picture which shows you that we created oxidized alginate with aldehyde groups. And then this is a liquid. As you add a cross-linker, it turns into a hydrogel. And this was under physiological conditions. So now looking at rheology on these materials, you can see that oxime was the stiffest, followed by semicarbazone and hydrazone. And you can see that among all these, hydrazone was more dynamic, since you can see the increase in crossover, increase in the loss moduli, and decrease of storage moduli, which predicts the forthcoming of a crossover point. So then we were interested to see if these dynamics also affect cells. So we encapsulated human dermal fibroblast cells in these hydrogel, and you can see cell stays round in stiffer and less dynamic hydrogels, but they showed spreading morphology in soft and more dynamic hydrogels. Then, to answer if we can use this as a bioink, we bioprinted chondrocytes and human dermal fibroblasts, and this is a video. You can see that hydrazone, which was more dynamic, most dynamic, allowed us to create bioinks out of these. So next, we were interested to recapitulate fibrous morphology of ECM, and for that, BTA was interesting since it has a fibrous structure on the same scale of extracellular matrix proteins. But this was nice, but there was a big challenge that usually these BTAs can be made on small scale, just on few milligram scale. And for me, challenge was, can I develop a new strategy where we can upscale the synthesis of these BTAs? So I developed a new strategy based on activated esters, and we used different nitrophenols, pentafluorophenols, and NHS. So pentafluorophenol works for us, and we showed nicely that we were able to create various multifunctional BTA architectures with alkyl, aryl, and click chemistries. So we were able to make these monomers. That was nice, but next question was, can we turn these monomers into hydrogels? And then, can we tune viscoelasticity, since that was the main aim, and stress relaxation timescales in these hydrogels? So we created telechallic polymers, and what we did was systematically studied varied external hydrophobic length on these materials, and studied if they would have different viscoelasticity. And as you can see, this is a schematic. So you have internal hydrophobic and then external hydrophobics, and then their two BTA units are connected via PEG-20K. So when we investigated stress relaxation of these material, you can see stress relaxation times increases with increasing number of carbon atoms on these materials in logarithmic fashion, and these stress relaxation timescales were in the range of soft tissues. We found that not only changing hydrophobicity does affect stress relaxation, but also it does affect 3D printability of these materials. As you can see, with increasing hydrophobicity, you get better 3D printability. So this was nice, but then we were able to make these. We used this for cell culture, but there was still a challenge. Since these are made up of non-covalent interactions and they tend to erode in cell culture, and we were not able to use them for longer times, and we went back and looked at ECM, and we wanted to take inspiration from collagen, and question was, can we make these more stable, but still dynamic, and can we mimic toughness of these materials? So we took inspiration from collagen. You can see it is a hierarchical structure, but if you look, these tropocollagen molecule, which forms collagen, they have these aldemine crosslinks, which crosslink these fibers. So then we went back and designed a new hydrogenator with norbornene on it, which can undergo thiolene chemistry. And what we did, we introduced intrafiber and interfiber crosslinks. As you can see, these again have fibrous morphology, and this is a comparison of supramolecular versus cross-linked hydrogel. You can see supramolecular hydrogels are weak. You can cut them easily, but as you cross-link, they really become tough. And when you cross-link them, you can also stretch them around 400 to 500% strain. Not only you can stretch them, but you can also 3D print them into a meniscus shape. And then a student can stand on them around 60 kg weight, but you would see that they still recover. That shows that they have toughness, good toughness. Then we wanted to show whether we can bioprint these hydrogelators, and we encapsulated chondrocytes. You can see after 13 days, they're still alive. And then we differentiated human mesenchymal stem cell spheroids in these hydrogels, and we stained them for collagen 2, which is a marker known for cartilage and collagen 2 was present, which was good news that this is good material for cartilage matrix production. So if I go back in the beginning of my presentation, so ask a question, can we use dynamic coupling chemistry and supramolecular chemistry to make hydrogels which are viscoelastic and also to use them as bioinks? So I hope that I've shown you, yes, certainly there is a potential, and I do believe that we do need more research where we can tune molecular dynamics to control macroscale properties. With that, I would like to thank you, my supervisors, Matt, Lorenzo, and Clemens. I would like to thank you, all the members of Assessment Committee and Defense Committee, all the members of CTR, Biomat, all collaborators, all co-authors, family and friends, and all the funding agencies, including ERC and Province of Limburg. Now I give the word back to Pro-Rector.
Thank you very much, dear candidate. I would like to start the opposition with Professor Dr. Tilman Hakking. He is a professor of biochemistry at the Institute of Karim here at Maastricht University, and he was also the chair of the assessment committee.
Thank you, Mr. Prorector. Dear candidate, first allow me to compliment you with this magnificent and impressive thesis, which I guess serves in the future as a valuable toolbox and reference guide for future tissue generation. It has resulted in numerous high-impact publications and pages, I should say, and naturally these commendations also extend to your promotion team. After reading your thesis, it was quite a job, but it was really fun to do so, and not being a bioprinting specialist, I believe that the most imminent application of your work on hydrogels is to fill in vivo cavities after surgery or trauma. And this is, of course, first to stabilize the post-injury environment, but secondly, of course, also allow influx of nutrients, most importantly, followed by cell infiltration, distribution, and proliferation. And you have designed your hydrogels to either bend, break, dynamically exchange, cleave, hydrolyze to allow cell infiltration. And my first question would be now to you, based on your experience and perhaps the putative need to apply one of your hydrogels tomorrow in the clinic, which general design would you choose, considering toxicity, administration, hosting of cells, of course, very important, and eventual biodegradability?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for kind words, and thank you for your question. So to answer your question, it really depends on the application, so I would say. So all of these hydrogels have different mechanical properties, which ranges different tissues. And also it depends, for example, how long do you want these hydrogels to be there?
Exactly, yeah.
So if you want them to be, for example, 3 days, 4 days, then I would go for probably hydrazone from alginate, which is more dynamic. But also, I would say, depending on mechanical properties of tissues, the last chapter where you have norbornene BTA, which you can actually tune mechanical properties, and then you can cross-link them with MMP cleavable cross-linkers, which cell can infiltrate and then degrade them by MMP.
So yeah, I think that's really clever design if you want to have cells like invading your hydrogel. But do you think there's an application where you would like to keep your hydrogel around for only 3 or 4 days? Is that not really short?
That's a good question. So I do think that.
I mean, I would agree with having sort of a stable hydrogel that cells can fool around with, especially your MMP strategy. I think that's a really clever one, which is also used in nature.
But I think you can still adjust. For example, if you talk about norbornenes, I have shown that you can tune, for example, MMP cleavable cross-linker concentration to tune them from few days until months. So depending on the application, if you need for long-term, you can kind of decrease. And also what I proposed in my discussion is that you can use these MMP cross-linkers. For example, you can tune them in such a way that they degrade slow, medium, and fast. So actually, you can use just those MMP cross-linkers to tune the degradation. So there's quite a lot of window. So I cannot think of right now what application, probably 3-4 days, but I guess after surgery, maybe if you want to fill cavities for some applications where you don't want to really leave them empty. So you want to make sure that there is something cell can infiltrate, come in, and then make it as a more like a home. Then even 3-4 days is really nice, because what we have seen from, let's say, clinical studies, that as soon as you inject stem cells without any material, just within 2-3 hours, almost 90% of the cells just go away. Nothing really stays there. So I think it's still really promising in a way that these are dynamic and would allow cells to infiltrate, and even for 3-4 days, I think it's a
right.
Really
but now I
good
hear you
step
say
forward.
that you sort of mix in differentiated iPSCs within the hydrogel to administer to the patient. Is that what you mean? And then, because I thought you were actually attracting cells from the natural cells from the patient himself or herself.
So I've seen that some people, they differentiate and then put cells inside and then they put inside, but also these days a lot of scientists, there's an argument that as soon as you put these materials, there are paracrine signals, there are autocrine signals, you really don't need any cells to put in, because cells would anyway invade depending on the pathway. So I would say you can adopt both strategies, but it really depends what you prefer.
Yeah, you say they would move in anyway. So what would attract cells to your chemical hydrogel? I mean,
so based on, I think either you can probably encapsulate certain growth factors to create a gradient, for example, but we also know that as soon as there is something external, immune cells kind of jump in and attacks and then goes there, and then you have other type of cells coming in. So I would guess maybe even if we don't have anything, as soon as the body knows there is something not part of the body and it is not harmful to the body, probably it would get infiltrated. That's, I would guess. I'm not sure how exactly it would work.
Right. I mean, this is a very important thing that you say, the gradient of growth factors. This is something that I really had to find in your thesis. It was not like really openly discussed. This is like incredibly important, so I'm very happy that you state this now. So, and about your let's say it's synthetic matrix that you administer, eventually you would like to replace this by the natural matrix made by the cells. So there should be sort of this interaction between disappearing matrix, your chemical matrix, and the build-up. So, and how do you see this coming about with your different blocks? I mean, would then the supramolecular or the covalent? So how and what would happen to the supramolecular blocks? Where would they go?
So that's a very good question, and whenever we made synthetic materials, that's the most common question people ask. For sure that you have to clear these materials over time through kidneys or through body, let's say, through different organs. And for sure you can talk about different type of cytotoxicity about these materials. But I guess over time, if your materials degrade, and if their molecular size is probably, I think, below, let's say, 30 kilodalton, that's what I know from literature that kidney can process. So I would say that probably they should go out over time.
Right.
Yeah, going through different organs for sure. And I don't really have an answer how much cytotoxicity it would do. We need more studies for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm very satisfied with your answers, and I give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you very much. I will continue the opposition with Professor Dr. Sarah Heilshorn. She's a professor of materials science and engineering from Stanford University, and she is online, and she was also a member of the assessment committee.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. Dear candidate, thank you for the presentation, and I am delighted to be joining you virtually today. I enjoyed reading the thesis work and hearing also you present on it. I wanted to begin the questions first by asking about the supramolecular gel system, which was chapter 7, I believe, of the thesis, and the rheological characterization of these studies and the changing in the hydrophobic chain links were really quite elegant. I'm wondering if you could share with me your thinking at a smaller length scale now, so at the molecular level. How are the effective cross links forming in these materials. So how do you envision this molecular self-assembly happening as you go from a single fiber to a hydrogel network?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for kind words and thank you for question. So we systematically varied hydrophobic length, and hypothesis was that as you are increasing hydrophobicity, as you go from C6 to C12, basically you slow down the exchange dynamics of BTA, because these BTAs like to stack in a fiber, and if you have larger hydrophobic pocket around, it kind of slows down the exchange dynamics, because then you have less interaction of your amide bonds with the environment. And that's how BTA stacks. But as soon as they start to stack, for sure there's a hydrophobic collapse, and then you form fibers. And then the hydrogel results from physical interactions between these fibers. But dynamicity and viscoelasticity is controlled by hydrophobic length. And that, we think, is governed by the exchange dynamics of these BTAs coming in and out of the fiber.
And so what you envision is that the molecules are popping out of a fiber and into maybe an adjacent fiber, rather than dynamic rearrangements within a single fiber. And that is giving rise to the viscoelasticity. Am I understanding your molecular model correctly?
That's right.
And then to give rise to the elastic modulus portion, you mentioned that the fibers have some physical interaction with each other. I'm wondering if you have some evidence that the effective cross-linking that's giving rise to the elastic portion of your mechanical properties is due primarily to entanglement of fibers, or if there may also be some branching of fibers that might occur, which is sometimes observed in other peptide self-assembled systems.
Thank you. This is really good question. So we think that since we saw that elastic moduli in rubbery, shear moduli in rubbery region, it stays the same. So we hypothesize that, okay, it's because we're not changing structure of these hydrogels, and if you're not changing structure, that means your cross-link density stays the same, because that's the area which is outside of your dynamic regime. But we also know what I have shown in chapter 5, where we do modular mixing of small molecule BTA and dumbbell BTA. We have good evidence that that dumbbell BTA act as a bridge, more like a branch between these BTA stacks, and then that act as a cross-linker. So we do have evidence there from, let's say, a super resolution microscopy, but for these hydrogels, we do not have quite good evidence on, let's say, a molecular level. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. And building on that answer, what would you expect would happen? I didn't see this in the thesis, although maybe you did the experiment. What would happen if you mixed the bifunctional molecules that have differing levels of hydrophobic end groups? So say the C6, C12 experiment was very elegant. I enjoyed reading those experiments. But what if you combine, say, a C6, C6 with a C12, C12? How would you predict that that would alter both the molecular stacking and then hence the viscoelastic properties of the gel?
So I did some of those experiments, which we did not include in the thesis. So for sure, the main story focus on controlling hydrophobic length and then number of carbon atoms dictating mechanical properties, but we were also interested in, let's say, biomodular mixing of these monomers. and that's where your question comes. And what we have seen is actually we saw two kind of, let's say, maxima in 10 delta, so which tells me that the C12 and C6 actually are operating on different regimes. For example, they have two type of, let's say, stress relaxation time scales. So C6 shows up faster and C12 shows up slower. But we did not see any kind of phase separation, so I would guess that they mix nicely. But to say that if these stacks become part of each other, we need more evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And then you mentioned that erosion of these materials can happen quickly over time in a cell culture environment, which prompted you in chapter 8 to add on the covalent stabilization inside fibers and across fibers. I was wondering if you could think about other possible designs that might allow you to improve the stability of the supramolecular system while retaining some of the stress relaxation properties.
Thank you for the question. So we can think of any orthogonal chemistry. So what I have done in chapter of organic synthesis, we have designed these molecules with, let's say, with azide, which we can use, for example, to do click chemistry, azidylkyne. And in short, it is really up to what we want to put and see if it is stable. So there are a lot of opportunities. And even with the current system, which I did not report in thesis, what we have seen, if we change the mole equivalence of crosslinker, we do tune stress relaxation timescales. So going from 0 to 0.25 to 0.5 to 0.75 to 1, so gels tends to become more elastic, and we have a good range where we can go from hundreds of seconds, let's say, probably to several thousands of seconds. So the 1-1 equivalent, it gets really elastic, but if you leave for a very long time, then you would see that it starts to come down and dissipate stresses. So even within this chemistry, we have seen that we can tune stress relaxation timescales. But we also have shown that if you add MMP crosslinker, which we use for cell culture studies, so we also have been thinking, for example, can you use this degradation, for example, to tune stress relaxation timescales? So I think that would also be something really nice to explore. Yeah.
Excellent. If my time allows, I have one final question for the candidate. So, and it follows directly from what you just mentioned about these MMP degradable covalent crosslinks used to stabilize the supramolecular system. How would you expect, or have you measured changes in the rheological properties of that system over time? And if not, how would you set up such a design of experiments?
Question. So to answer that, the system gets a little bit complicated. So you have a system which is continuously changing, and depending on how much enzymes you have, your hydrogels are not really, let's say if they start to degrade from inside, shape doesn't really retain. So we have done degradation studies, but to do rheology or mechanical testing, it's a little bit tricky. Maybe you can go towards AFM, maybe, or maybe you can use, for example, microindentation techniques, I would say, that you can locally probe these properties. And there, again, we know that if you go at nanoscale, microscale properties sometimes tends to differ, especially at nanoscale, you get to high modulus. So then you have to probably use some formulas to compare with rheology. Yeah.
Thank you, dear candidate, for answering my questions. I'm complete with my examination.
Thank you very much, Professor Heilshorn. The opposition will be continued by Professor Romano Oru. He is a professor of organic chemistry of bio-based materials from the IBM Institute from Maastricht University. He was also a member of the assessment committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to discuss with the candidate his very nice work. It's really an impressive thesis with a bit of organic chemistry in there, but a lot of, let's say, applications which for the larger part I was not aware of yet, but now I am. So it was really beautiful to read it, and I learned a lot from it. So probably it may not surprise that my questions focus a bit on the organic chemistry part. So I would like to go with you to page 75 in figure 1, where you are, let's say, describing your design by using reversible cross-linking units like oxine or sine carbazone and hydrozones to tune the viscoelastic properties. So maybe first question is, why did you choose for these specific reversible cross-linking units? And did you make a comparison with, let's say, the most simple one, which is a simple imine or iminium?
Yeah. Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for kind words and thank you for your question. So with imine type, there have been a lot of studies has been done before. So our aim was to tune viscoelastic properties. And so we took some help from literature. So we know that KAQ for these materials were different. And also in literature, we saw that not explicitly mentioned, but there are some, let's say, clues where we saw that K-1 is different. And we know that K-1 would be different for oxime versus semicarbazone versus hydrazone because you have oxygen versus nitrogen, and your oxygen is more electronegative, so you have inductive effect, which takes away the electron density. So your attack of your nitrogen from amine becomes, let's say, slows down, let's say if it is hydrolysis. So that was the rational thinking behind it, so that because the reversibility goes through hydrolysis. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to see if that attacks become slow or fast, if that would give us different viscoelastic properties. So that was the hypothesis, and we saw that nicely with hydrazone. You get more dynamic compared to oxime, which is slowed.
Well, in principle, you could, let's say, tune the same properties by changing also in the backbone, making substituents over there. So yeah. What made you choose to go to another sort of different functionality instead of tuning in the backbone?
Yeah. So there are different ways to do it. For sure, there have been also a lot of studies, especially with hyaluronic acid, where you introduce aldehydes on hyaluronic acid or different other polymers to cross-link. But we had an alginate material, which we know is biocompatible, and we know that we can oxidize it to create these aldehyde groups, and we can tune depending on the amount of oxidation. So that was the material we know from literature is good. And then this becomes also more like modular, where you just pick different cross-linkers, and then you just add, and then you get a hydrogel. Mm-hmm. So there was a less synthesis involved. It was faster. So you just need to mix 2 or 3 things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's clear. So then I have another set of questions around chapter 6. They sort of focus around the scheme 1, where you describe these desymmetrization methods of these benzene tricarboxyl amides that you use. And you have this, let's say, this specific approach, which is very nice. And based on that, you design in, on page, I think, 158 and 59, but I have to check myself and go there as well. You have in scheme 5 there. You show that you can, let's say, vary around the core by introducing different nitrogen, so let's say amines as a nucleophile. But these you chose to do only to investigate only primary amines as a nucleophile here. Did you consider using other types of nucleophiles to see what the influence would be?
Yeah. So we looked into primary amines because our aim was to make it simple, keep it simple, and then get amide bonds. And primary amines also, we know that better nucleophile compared to secondary amines, so that's faster.
Well, that's not entirely true, I would say, but okay.
Okay. But for sure, secondary amines and tertiary amines can also be explored with these. So we actually did not think, but I think it's a very nice comment, and probably we should look in future.
Yeah, I think could be giving nice new properties, but it's also more complex, I guess, because you need to generate a secondary amine, and that's also not always very obvious. Another question, which is a bit related, is you have chosen to, next to the, let's say, linear primary amine, you also chose to use this norbornene-derived primary amine. But with that, you would, in principle, be able to, let's say, distinguish between stereochemistry in the product. And that could also influence, let's say, complexation. Did you think of that? Did you observe it?
This is a very good question, thank you. We talked about this, so we have this mixture which is around 80% endo and 21% exo, if I'm not wrong. So as soon as we get that we can desymmetrize, the first thing that we thought was, okay, can we play around with the stereochemistry? Unfortunately, I did not see any two different spots in TLC, but I think that's probably, we're looking in probably in future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I do think that there would be at least some hope that you would get to see some type of effect.
Yeah. It seems obvious, but
you never know.
Show it.
Yeah.
So let's see if I have another question. Yeah. So on page 161, I had also a question about the molecules you use, and there you show that you in the R1 and R2, let's say side chains, you make it an aliphatic chain. And the N is always 12. So did you consider also tuning on that? Like you have the N is 12, maybe it was an easy, let's say, input for your reaction. But if you make it shorter or longer, would that have an influence? And what would be the influence?
So actually, this is also a very nice question. So the original paper that gave me, when I started as a PhD, that gave me some hope that there is some window that we can tune was where they actually changed internal hydrophobic and not external. So they kept the external hydrophobic constant. And what they saw is that you get some type of fibril morphology, which was ECM mimicking. And they also saw not this much tunability in viscoelastic properties, but at least on the order of, let's say, 2 orders of magnitude. So that was already more or less done. So we did not have a lot of freedom to explore there. But for sure, as you said, maybe by introducing stereochemistry there, you can still try to explore.
Or constrain it because you then make it more fixed. But these are just ideas for the future, I guess. Maybe if I have some more time, I have 1 or 2 questions on your analysis of the products, which I think will not be very easy with this type of complex molecules. So on 174, let's see what I had there. And also, so on 174 and the next page as well, the compounds that you make over there, you analyze by proton and carbon NMR. And you try to do also MALDI-TOF, but that didn't give you an MS. Do you think that that NMR only is enough to prove the structures that you have there?
Yeah, for sure. I agree that we need more techniques, let's say. But with this, actually, what we noticed was that, okay, let me rethink. So we had a mixture of these reaction mixtures, and then we try to separate. And then we try to separate these molecules, we get different spots. And from that mixture to coming to single component was the process where we get confidence, okay, this is this molecule. And if we talk about in terms of chemistry, for sure you need probably some other techniques as well.
Okay. Well, I'm through with my questions, so I'm satisfied. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Oru. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Sabine van Rijt. She's an associate professor in nanobiomaterials in the Merlin Institute in Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first I want to congratulate you on your magnificent thesis. Not only the amount, the volume of work, but also the quality is really excellent, so I want to congratulate you on that. I would like to start actually by asking one of your panelists to read Proposition 10.
A positive mindset, patience, perseverance, and being investigated are key traits required for a great PhD.
So I agree with you on that. I think these are also very important. Can you explain what you mean with being far-sighted, and can you give some examples on how you demonstrated this during your PhD?
So, esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. PhD is difficult, we all know. So you go through a lot. So most of the time you're down, but some days are only up, right? And the project that you're doing, you should know what you're doing and what's the potential of that project. And if you see that you have a potential and you're almost there, there's something that you need to optimize. So you should have that farsightedness, what it would be the potential of this product in let's say, on the field, and also, let's say, for your own personal let's say, fulfilling satisfaction, what you achieved. So I think if you have that long sightedness or long, let's say, view of things, then it becomes easy to stay motivated. And then you continue working hard. And if you don't have that, it's very easy to get lost of track. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So in chapter 2, you describe many ways on how we can use chemical systems or strategies to mimic key features of the extracellular matrix. And you rightly mentioned that many process and variables of the ECM are important, but this then leads to the assumption that we need to create materials that become increasingly complex. However, this is of course impractical in their clinical use. So I was wondering how or where do you see the field move in regard to this aspect in the next 5 to 10 years?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So there are different ways that you can make these materials. As long as you want to make complex materials, I think that's still fine if you introduce complexity step by step. Let's say you first introduce something, you understand it, then you introduce second thing, then you understand it, then you introduce third thing, then you know that how your system is behaving. And that's how what nature has done. And with these materials, since your question is very broad, so I would say if you want to talk about, let's say, hydrogels, I do think that you really need materials which can mimic dynamicity of these ECM and structure, and then different functionalities, and multi-competency is also one. So we need materials which we can design at molecular scale and understand them better, and taking inspiration from nature. So with bioink development, I think there's a huge potential to create complex shapes with these cells inside. So I think probably bioink area would be the one that you would see that with a lot of potential, but then microfabrication, organoids, then this would adds up, and then moving on, you would combine all these technologies to tackle this challenge.
Okay, thanks. I would like to move to chapter 8, the interfibular hydrogels that you investigated. So you investigated polymer weight percent and also the effect of different types of crosslinkers on the material properties, but you saw relatively little effect of the different types of crosslinkers. So based on your data, would you say crosslinking took place mainly interfibularly, or what would you say?
That's a very good question. We were actually surprised by this also. So based on the data, it seems like there's a very little inter-crosslinking and mainly intra. To check also, we changed crosslinker length. And again, we saw that in shear modulus, it stays the same. But as soon as you go for compression or tensile studies, there you start to see a difference in terms of, let's say, elongation. So in rheology, we see everything same, but in tensile, we saw that the elongation was different. And you can imagine if you have a long polymer, then you get more elongation. So to answer your question, I do think there's a more intrafiber and there's a less interfiber, but I do think that we need probably a little more probing to see what is happening. Yeah.
So then my next question would be, can you think of a way where you can stimulate more interfiber cross-linking?
Interfiber cross-linking. So probably I think you can use different cross-linkers, not only these PEG, or maybe, let's say, maybe hydrophobics, they might have different influence. You may use multivalency, let's say you introduce 2, 4, 8, and then you start to see maybe with increasing multivalency you have more interfiber cross-links. One way would be also to combine, for example, let's say nanoparticles, where you have a lot of functionalities, right? And then you know that since you have a lot of, let's say, for example, nanoparticles thiols, then you know that since you have a lot of thiols, and then they can react with different fibers, and they can try to cross-link. So that's what I would think.
And then a final question on this. So you introduced this covalent cross-linking within this dynamic system. Do you think there is like a maximum amount of cross-linking you can do before it jeopardizes the dynamicity of your material?
Yeah. Thanks. Again, very good question. So what we have seen is that if you go from 0.25 to 1, your dynamics get slower. And when we increase from 1 to 2, actually your modulus starts to decrease. And then your dynamics in terms of rheology are comparable for 2 and 0.5. So 2 mole equivalents and 0.5. They're almost comparable, not the same. So I do think that the maximum is that you introduce 1-to-1 ratio of your norbornene to thiols. But if you start to introduce more, then I would guess that you get more probably free ends. And if it is thiol, that we were also wondering if it get oxidized and then you get disulfide bonds. It seems like from the data that's not the case. Yeah.
Okay. If I may, I have also some questions more on some of the cell studies you did. Sure. For chapter 4. So there you describe cell viability in your different prepared gels. Why do you think the metabolic activity of the cells in oxime cross-linked alginate was so much lower than in your other materials?
So oxime was the stiffest and also less dynamic. And we saw that in live dead as a cell stays round, they actually did not increase their volume, they did not spread. So I would guess probably they are stressed out and they're not as metabolically active as compared to hydrazone. Yeah, so they did not, let's say they did not like probably, I don't want to say they did not like the material, but they were not happy, let's say, because we saw that they were still alive, but they did not spread, they have very rounded morphology. So I think that's probably the reason that metabolic activity was low.
And why do you think the metabolic activity decreased in the other conditions, which over time, which I found quite curious? So this is page 81.
Page 81.
Or 82.
Oh, yes. So what we have seen also is that as you elongate cell culture times, your cells are likely to go out of the hydrogels and they go away. So if I recall correctly, then what we did, we take out hydrogels, put in a different vial, let's say, and then we investigated viability. So I think that's probably the reason why it went down. Yeah, because we did not want to study what is on the plate. So because then you can get signals which are not correct. So then probably you would get higher metabolic activity compared to what is inside the hydrogel.
So because you see it also in your controls, right? So you think it's the cell number decreased or?
Yeah, I would. There are two ways. So a lot of people, when they do press to blue, and if they say metabolic activity decreases, then and cell number is low, then probably we should do proliferation assay as well to see how many cells are there. So right now I would hesitate to say anything because we need to know how many cells are there, if they die, if they went away. So if we do proliferation assay, then we would have better answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a final question on this. So in the following section in the chapter, you describe RGD functionalization of your materials and you look at cell spreading. Would you expect differences also in your metabolic assay if you had used the RGD modified materials there?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, so in the next part of that chapter, you describe that you functionalize your materials with RGD to allow cell attachment.
Yeah.
And then you look at cell spreading. My question is, if you would have used those same materials, but then in your metabolic activity assays, would you have expected a different result?
Yes, for sure, because then you introduce bioactivity, and if your cells are attaching to RGD, I would say that they would be metabolically more active because they attach to something and they start to function. Yes, I would hypothesize that, okay, you would see higher signals. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm satisfied with the answers.
Thank you very much. The opposition will be closed by Professor Dr. Roman Trockenmüller. He is a professor of microtissue engineering in the Merlin Institute in Maastricht University. And today he also acts as the secretary of the Defense Committee, for which I thank him very much.
Thank you, Prorector. Dear candidate, let me also congratulate you on your thesis, which I enjoyed reading, where I also learned many new things, but which of course also challenged me with my engineering background, I have to say. I would also like to extend my compliments, of course, to the supervisory team. Let us go straight to the question. My question 1 is related to chapter 5, where you mention a cell encapsulation method based actually on the self-healing method. I was interested how that would work in practical terms in the clinics. Would you really break down a slab into smaller pieces and then mix with the media, or would you look into making directly microgels, or how would you see that?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for kind words and thank you for question. So what we have noticed with these hydrogels, especially with modular mixing, since you have small molecule BTA, which is elastic, and you have dumbbell BTA, which are viscoelastic, which are more dynamic. So we tried different methods of cell encapsulation. So we tried chemical method, we tried freeze-drying method, and then we tried self-healing. Self-healing we tried because your hydrogels self-heal once you break them put together. And for clinical applications, I think you can still go with this method. You can still break them, still encapsulate them. And it's also easy for clinical application. You just take these out on, for example, spatula, and then whatever the procedure, standard procedure is, and then you put them there. So it took me, I also want to mention that it took me some time to optimize the procedure as well, because cells are very sensitive, and as soon as you try to encapsulate them, you can easily get a lot of dead cells also. So you need really good hands to encapsulate cells. But what we also did, we also tried to sandwich between different layers to try to see if we can get better encapsulation. So that was also one way to encapsulate them really inside the hydrogel. So you make different layers and then you put inside, and then, yeah.
Thank you. My question 2 is actually related to the more loose or more compact cell aggregates which you found in different formulations. And I was wondering actually from a technical or a bioengineering or biological perspective, what would be more preferable? More compact or more loose aggregates?
Thank you, very good question. So I do think that I don't have a lot of, I would be honest, I don't have a lot of knowledge on aggregates and how compact and how loose they are, because that's just beyond my expertise. But I would say that what I know from literature is that if you have human mesenchymal stem cells, you get mesenchymal condensation, and then you get better cell aggregates. So one way to look at that is that if you get better condensation, that means your cells are healthy, and that's an indication that, okay, you want them to be compact. But we also saw that it was also cell-dependent. So we saw for MSCs that they were more compact, but for chondrocytes, they were less compact. So I don't have very clear answer what we need, but for that I need more probably literature review. But I would say, depending on cell type, and if you have, for example, especially for mesenchymal stem cell, if you have more compact, then that's probably better in terms of aggregation. Yeah, because I just want to also add, because if you have loose spheroids or aggregates, they also can fall apart while handling, right? So it's easy. So also, compact aggregation would also show that you have better cadherin interactions, let's say, because these cells come together with cadherin, and then you have better junctions. So I'd say the more compact is probably better. Yeah, I would hypothesize that. Yeah.
Thank you. My question 3 is related actually to chapter 7, and there particularly to figure 2b on page 234. So I was actually very interested to see these aligned fibers, but also wondering, maybe you can give us an idea how big do we look on domains, and how big are they?
So you mean
these fibrous domains, so what we see in the electron microscopy images, if we would zoom out, is these kind of endless? How big are these ordered domains?
So for us, we did cryo SEM, and we also did cryo TEM. So for us, so what we saw in cryo TEM was their length was on the order of several nanometer to several micron, but also you have limit in cryo TEM that you cannot see everything. So from literature, usually the way people report, if you cannot see in cryo TEM, all of you assume that, okay, it's probably in micron scale. So on the diameter level, if you look in cryo TEM, you get different type of bundling. You have probably single fibers, which were around 1.5 nanometer, and then your diameter increases from 10 to 15, where you get bundling. And sometime it was also around 50 nanometer. But in terms of length, it was still for us not to see clearly how elongate they are. So, but I would say on micron scale, from nanometer scale to micron scale. Yeah.
And we probably look on a kind of spontaneous alignment where the overall direction of the domains is not exactly defined. Can you think maybe of some engineering ways to give maybe design and architecture or patterning to these fibers, maybe not so dissimilar as we have maybe in our body, for example, arch type or wave type of architectures?
Yeah. So for alignment, for sure, it is very good for different applications. So what I would think, probably you can use different size needles. You can go from probably 500 micron to 100 micron. So you can start to see if they align better, and you can play around with pressure and flow rate. But you can also do is using microfluidic principles. You can design these devices where you have, for example, different patterns, and you can probably change geometry and then see what is the influence of changing different geometries and architecture on your alignment.
Thank you. And then we would have a question. Actually, you mentioned several times also for future applications that organoids could be an interesting field to investigate. So it's interesting, particularly how that would work with epithelial cystic organoids. Would they benefit actually from this fibrillar structure?
With epithelial.
So if you look on the, if you look on the basement membrane, for example.
So basement membrane, it has glycoproteins, it has laminin, so that is a 2D structure. So you have more like a sheet. It's a fibrous, but it's also 2D. So from that perspective, for sure, you get something which is aligned, and you might get some interesting results where your epithelial cells try to align. But I think we need more studies. We tried in exploring HUX, but we did not get to see films. We did not get to make films and try to align them. What we did was in 3D, where we wanted to see if they might, with dynamicity inside these materials, they might try to align. But we did not get to do a lot. So I think we need more studies to explore that. But for sure, I think especially considering cell types, maybe I'm going away from your question, but maybe myoblast or maybe tenocyte, since they are muscle tenocyte, or maybe nerve cells even, since you need more alignment there, there might be better options to also explore.
So it looks we still have a few seconds. So would be maybe my final question probably is related maybe to the impact. So when looking on these formulations, would you see them more like also something which is also, yeah, in a certain way price efficient? Because if we think of maybe using small amounts, so there have been applications discussed where these formulations go on the body, but maybe on in vitro systems, maybe small amounts, maybe would you maybe then rely more on really building them as they are with recombinant technologies? So would you see maybe the advantage of your systems more also in that at the end we should, society need also to create affordable solutions for medicine, that this is where they are very particularly strong?
Yeah. So that was also one of the motivation, because especially with BTAs, so we know that they actually mimic many aspects of ECM, but creation of these materials with simple and cheap ways was difficult. So for sure, I would think that these materials would benefit, but for sure, for that you need a lot of studies further to prove that really these materials are beneficial.
Shahzad Hafeez, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. Southside, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile or not. What's on the line? I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Shahzad Hafeez, the Decree Committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the Decree Committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Moroni is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
I do.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Shahzad Hafeez, cum laude, the degree of doctor, and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present to you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, is it on? Good. Okay, esteemed guests, friends, and colleagues, today we gather to honor the extraordinary journey of now Dr. Shahzad Hafeez. His dedication, innovation, and unassuming strength have illuminated the path of his academic pursuit, leaving an indelible mark on our group and institute. First of all, I want to thank you all for making this possible. Professor Hilshorn for traveling all the way from California virtually to join us here today, but also for your kind words and guidance during conference meetings, also with Shahzad. Professor Oro for giving us some nice hard organic chemistry to look at every once in a while, giving us feedback and making our chemical community here stronger. Professor Hocking, chairing the committee. You were one of the first ones to open up our labs. Shahzad worked in your labs a little bit when we were first getting things set up. Dr. Van Wright, partner in crime and biomaterials here. I think everyone can see that clearly. Professor Truckenmuller, you also helped us get the group started, and we provided guidance to Shahzad throughout his career. And yeah, Professor Moroni and Professor von Blitterswijk for guiding this young gentleman towards a doctorate. And last but not least, thanks, Shahzad. Shahzad's extremely smart, yet also just foolish enough to take some risks. Do you realize how risky it was to join a group that hadn't even started yet for your PhD?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Well, as a founding member, his impact really resonates far beyond the confines of this thesis that we have printed out in front of us. I mean, along with many members of my group, he's not only had to experiments with relationships between molecules, but also experiments with relationships between people. And he may or might not have had a group leader who said at times, look, I have no idea what we're doing here. Although it took it some time, his feedback, honesty, and ability to have difficult conversations has helped mold our group into what it is today. We've all learned a lot from Shahzad. The chemistry and bioengineering is simply what we see on paper, what goes into public record. What you feel working with him is far more impactful. Shahzad embodies the virtues of kindness, genuineness, and yet quiet, profound influence. His humility and unwavering dedication to his work and peers make him a good example of integrity and collaboration. His achievements transcend, again, what's in his thesis. It's rooted in his ability to infuse every interaction with compassion, wisdom, and quiet power that effortlessly commands respect. His resolute commitment to knowledge, collaboration, and pushing the boundaries of scientific exploration has not only helped define the ethos of the Institute, but has also served as an inspiration to all those around him. Now, I don't want to minimize his achievements, but honestly, Shahzad's academic journey is nothing more than a testament to his exceptional character. Despite an initial discord between the chemistry he wanted to do and the direct clinical translation Shahzad wanted to do, you did not want to do the chemistry at first, not at all. We found a way. Shahzad, with characteristic determination, navigated the nuances of both disciplines and comes out a master of both. His persistence in learning, although begrudgingly at times, comes from his commitment to understanding science and interdisciplinary research. You quoted Abdus Salam in your propositions, and I thought it was quite nice. Another quote of his that I like is, from time immemorial, man has desired to comprehend the complexity of nature in terms of as few elementary concepts as possible. And you do this. You have the ability to take extremely complex relationships, extremely complex data, and distill them down to where your colleagues, your friends, even experts can understand. And the greatest thing is that you're not a savant here. You do it through hard work. You talk to others. You ask opinions. You ask for people to shoot holes in your ideas until you understand them better. You're a tough one to argue with, but everyone comes out better because of it. One of the greatest difficulties in advisors knowing to get out of the way, and I'll tell you a quick story. Shahzad is quite polite. We all see this, right? Quite polite, you like things done in a certain way. We talked about this, and it came to my knowledge that the places you were at before Maastricht did not really encourage dissidence or going up against authority. And it took us a while. It took about a year for you to tell me that you didn't like something I did or thought the project could go in a different direction. But by the end, you were really good at it. By the end, I'll never forget the last year. I was trying so hard to get you to finish your thesis, but you wanted to keep doing science, right? It's always a struggle, I think, that we see. And you came in with this crazy idea that we talked about it in a group. How can we put covalent bonds in these structures? And you said, Matt, look, I want to make this. I said, look, Shahzad, you've got to finish your thesis. She said, okay, but I'm going to make this. So look, okay, we're not going to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it. You just show me whenever it works. Prove me wrong. And 2 weeks later, he came back with a key piece of evidence that showed us that we were onto something. We could really open up something. You know, and along the way there, you got really frustrated with me at one time. I'll never forget this. He kept saying that it was tough. I said, Shahzad, show me. What do you mean? Matt, it's tough. Just trust me. I said, yeah, but show me. And this is where during his thesis, you saw him standing on a 3D printed construct of his cartilage. He said, look, Matt, do you believe me now? I also want to take a moment to recognize Shahzad's family and friends. Your support and patience have fueled this achievement as well. I know he understands this, and he'll do everything in his power to support you in return. Aksa, keep making noise in his life. Be a little bit louder. Keep him on his toes, and don't let him become a grumpy old man just yet. Sarah, you're about to walk. Your role's about to change. Just remember, you need to get around your father. Sometimes he's got a bum left knee. To Shahzad's parents, I know you're both immensely proud of your son, and you should be. His journey is well underway, and you'll both always be behind his back. Keep pushing him forward. As Shahzad steps into the next chapter of his journey, armed now with a doctoral degree, this proof of his ability to make meaningful contribution, let us not only celebrate his accomplishments, but the transformative impact he's poised to make in the future. Please join me in honoring the exceptional accomplishments of Dr. Shahzad Hafeez.
Dear Dr. Shahzad Hafeez, also on behalf of the Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the degree you have acquired, and that also cum laude, which is really something exceptional, especially here in this university. You all probably also wondering what we all discussed in that little room over there. I will not tell you everything, but I give you some highlights. It was a very nice presentation. The candidate displayed breadth and depth of knowledge. A marvelous piece of work, managed the topic as a whole, very eloquent but to the point, and very accurate as a scientist and as a person. I would also like to congratulate your family, your friends, and of course also the supervisory team. I do not want to close the session yet. I first want to also give Professor Heilshorn, who is online, to give you one moment to say some words to you, and you can also address her, and she will see you via that camera over there. Professor Heilshorn, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this ceremony and to offer a few words from afar. Shahzad, I very much enjoyed following your academic journey and learning about the truly important contributions you have made to the biomaterials design community. Your ability to see opportunity and excitement in joining a new research team with Dr. Baker shows that you are ambitious and that you are willing to follow your academic journey and your scientific interests wherever they may lead. I truly enjoyed hearing about your interdisciplinary project, and I look forward to interacting with you more in the future as a colleague. Thank you, and congratulations again to you and your family and friends and your supervisory team.
Thank you, Sarah, for kind words. You have been an inspiration for me. I want to tell you because from the beginning of my PhD, I followed your work and we get a lot of cool ideas from there. And also, I would like to thank you for managing time to be on my assessment committee. And I also still follow your work, and you have some brilliant ideas and work coming from your lab. So you have been an inspiration for me. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would now close the official part of the ceremony.